The gunshot echoed through the mountain pass before she even learned his name. Alora Vance hadn't come to Iron Ridge looking for love. She'd come running from death itself. The elegant woman in silk and lace clutching a stolen ledger worth more than gold. The mountain man who wanted a sturdy farmhand, not a refined lady with blood on her hands. When Victor Hallstrom's killers arrived with badges and bullets, their fragile arrangement shattered into something far more dangerous: survival. This is their story. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this tale travels. The stagecoach lurched to a stop in a cloud of alkali dust, and Iron Ridge held its breath. It wasn't much of a town, a scatter of weathered buildings clinging to the edge of civilization like barnacles on a dying ship. The saloon, the general store, a church that doubled as a schoolhouse on Sundays. Everything else was just mountain and sky, and the kind of silence that made men nervous. Darius Boone stood outside the trading post, arms crossed, jaw set like granite. 6'3" of muscle and scar tissue wrapped in buckskin and suspicion. His beard was thick and dark, shot through with premature silver, and his eyes, pale gray, like winter ice, tracked the coach with the same intensity he'd use on a wounded grizzly. He'd been waiting 3 weeks. 3 weeks since he'd sent the money. 3 weeks since he'd posted the advertisement in the Sacramento paper. Mountain trapper seeks practical woman for marriage. Must be strong, resourceful, unbothered by isolation. No refinement necessary. Respond to D. Boone, Iron Ridge. It had been a transaction, nothing more. He needed help surviving the winters. The highlands were brutal, and loneliness had a way of killing a man just as surely as cold or starvation. A partnership made sense. Romance didn't enter into it. The stagecoach door opened. A weathered woman in her 50s descended first, the widow Kowalski, returning from visiting her sister in Sacramento. Then a railroad surveyor with ink-stained fingers and a nervous disposition. Then a drummer selling patent medicine, his sample case rattling with bottles of snake oil and broken promises. Darius waited. The driver climbed down, spat tobacco juice into the dust. That's everyone. No. Darius's voice was gravel and flint. There's supposed to be one more. Ain't no one else, mister. Just them 3. Something cold settled in Darius's gut. 3 weeks. He'd already paid, already made arrangements, already resigned himself to the necessity of it all. Then he heard it, a rustle of fabric, the creak of the coach's suspension adjusting to weight. A gloved hand appeared on the door frame. Slender, pale, definitely not the calloused, work-hardened hand he'd been expecting. The woman who stepped down into the dust of Iron Ridge was a mistake. Everything about her screamed it. The traveling dress of deep emerald silk that must have cost more than most men earned in a year. The delicate parasol, completely useless against mountain sun. The way she moved, careful, uncertain, like a dancer trying to navigate a battlefield. She was beautiful in the way that fine things are beautiful. Porcelain and precision. Dark hair swept up in an elaborate arrangement that would last exactly 5 minutes in the highlands. Her eyes were large and dark, framed by lashes that looked too long to be real. Her skin was the kind of pale that spoke of indoor living, of parlors and piano lessons, of a life that had never known real work. She looked at Iron Ridge with barely concealed horror. The town looked back with barely concealed fascination. Darius felt his jaw tighten. You've got the wrong stop, ma'am. She turned those dark eyes on him, and he saw something flicker there. Fear, maybe, or determination trying to disguise itself as confidence. Are you Darius Boone? His stomach dropped. I am. Then I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. She lifted her chin, a gesture that would have been imperious if her hands weren't shaking. I'm Alora Vance, your bride. The word hung in the air like gun smoke. Darius stared at her. At the silk dress and the parasol and the traveling trunk being unloaded from the coach, leather and brass, monogrammed with initials that definitely weren't hers. At the ridiculous hat perched on her carefully arranged hair. At everything about her that was wrong, catastrophically wrong. No, he said flatly. You're not. I assure you I am. I wrote to a Sarah Brennan, farmer's daughter from Nebraska, strong as an ox according to her letter, could gut a deer and plow a field. He gestured at her, taking in the entirety of her absurd elegance. "You're about as much Sarah Brennan as I am the King of England." Color rose in her cheeks. "Sarah couldn't come." "Why not?" "She changed her mind." "And you just decided to take her place?" Darius's laugh was short and bitter. "Do I look like a fool to you, Miss Vance?" "No." Her voice was quiet but steady. "You look like a man who sent money for a bride and expects what he paid for. But Sarah got a better offer, a merchant in Sacramento with a house and servants and no mountains. She sold me her correspondence, everything you sent, the money, the instructions, She sold you." Darius couldn't believe what he was hearing. "A mail order arrangement. I paid her $50. Alara's hands twisted around the handle of her parasol. "Everything I had left." "Left from what?" She didn't answer, just looked at him with those dark eyes that were trying so hard to be brave and failing spectacularly. The stagecoach driver cleared his throat. "Look, folks, I got a schedule." "The lady's going back," Darius said. "Next coach south." "That's 3 days from now," the driver said, "and it'll cost her." "I don't have anything left to pay with." Alara's voice was barely a whisper now. "I told you I spent everything." Darius felt the trap closing around him. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw what he should have seen immediately. The dress was expensive, yes, but it was also worn at the cuffs and hem. The trunk was monogrammed, but the initials had been scored out, almost violently. Her hands were shaking, and not just from nerves. She was running from something. "What did you do?" he asked. "Nothing that concerns you." "If you're standing here pretending to be my bride, it concerns me plenty." The color drained from her face. For a moment he thought she might faint. She had that porcelain fragility that suggested she might shatter at the slightest impact. But she didn't. She straightened her spine, lifted her chin, and met his eyes with something that looked almost like defiance. "I made a mistake," she said. "Several mistakes, actually, and now I'm trying to survive them. If you send me back, I won't. It's that simple." "That's not my problem." "No," she agreed. "It's not. But you paid for a bride, Mr. Boone, and I'm here. I'll work, I'll learn, I'll do whatever you need. I'm stronger than I look." Darius doubted that very much. She looked like a strong wind would snap her in half. Behind him, someone snickered. He turned to find half the town had gathered, merchants and miners, the blacksmith and the assayer, all watching this disaster unfold with barely concealed amusement. Willem Koch, who ran the saloon, was grinning like a cat with a mouse. "Looks like you got yourself a real lady, Boone," Willem called out. "Better dust off them table manners." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Darius felt heat crawl up the back of his neck. He'd lived in these mountains for 8 years, and in that time he'd earned a reputation, hard, fair, not a man to cross. He'd survived winters that killed other trappers, fought off claim jumpers, once tracked a wounded cougar for 3 days through a blizzard. Men respected him because he was competent and dangerous in equal measure. And now he was standing in the street arguing with a woman in silk who probably couldn't tell a skinning knife from a butter knife. "This is a mistake," he said again, but he was talking to himself now. Alara seemed to sense the shift. She took a step closer, lowering her voice so only he could hear. "Please, I have nowhere else to go. And you need help, don't you? That's why you sent for someone. Give me 2 weeks. If I can't prove my worth by then, I'll find another way. But please don't send me back on that coach." There was something in her voice. Not desperation exactly. Desperation was weak. This was harder, sharper. This was the sound of someone who'd already lost everything and refused to lose any more. Darius looked past her at the mountains rising in the distance. His cabin was a 2-day ride from here, deep in the high country where the air was thin and the winters could bury a man alive. It was no place for someone like her. She'd probably freeze to death before Thanksgiving. But the money was spent. The winter was coming. And something about the way she stood there, trembling but unbowed, reminded him of a deer he'd once found caught in a trap, terrified and hurting but still fighting. He'd freed that deer. It had kicked him in the chest hard enough to crack a rib. 2 weeks, he heard himself say. "You get 2 weeks to prove you're not completely useless. After that, I'm taking you back to town myself, and you can sort out your own problems." Relief flooded her face. "Thank you, Don't thank me yet. He turned to the driver. Get her trunk. The trunk was heavier than he expected, packed with God knew what useless things. He hefted it onto his shoulder with a grunt and started toward where his horse was tied. Behind him, he heard the rustle of silk as Alara tried to follow. Mr. Boone? He didn't stop. What? I don't know how to ride a horse. Of course she didn't. Darius closed his eyes, counted to 5, and reminded himself that murder was illegal even this far from civilization. Then you'll learn, he said. We've got a 2-day ride ahead of us, and I'm not carrying you. The first hour was a disaster. Alara had no seat, no balance, and apparently no idea that horses were living animals rather than ambulatory furniture. She clung to the saddle horn like it was the railing on a sinking ship, her knuckles white, her face pale with barely suppressed terror. Darius had put her on Bess, his gentlest mare, a patient old girl who'd carried supplies through blizzards without complaint. But even Bess seemed puzzled by this strange, frightened creature on her back. They made maybe 3 miles before Darius called a halt. You're going to fall off and break your neck, he said, dismounting. And then I'll have to bury you, and I don't have time for that. I'm fine, Alara insisted, but her voice shook. You're holding the reins like they're a lifeline. The horse can feel that. Makes her nervous. He moved to Bess's side, looked up at Alara. Relax your hands. Sit deeper in the saddle. Move with her, not against her. I'm trying. Try harder. The words came out harsher than he'd intended, but damn it, he didn't have patience for this. This isn't a parlor. There's no one here to carry you when you fail. You either learn or you die. That's how it works up here. Something flashed in her eyes. Anger, maybe. Good. Anger was useful. Fear just got people killed. She took a breath, adjusted her grip. Show me. They spent another hour on the basics. How to hold the reins, how to shift her weight, how to read Bess's ears and breathing. Alara was clumsy and awkward, but she paid attention, asked questions, didn't complain even when her hands started to blister. By the time the sun started its descent toward the mountains, she was managing something that almost resembled competent riding. Better, Darius admitted grudgingly. We'll make camp soon. Why? There's still daylight. Because you're about to fall off from exhaustion, and I'm not interested in watching it happen. He found a clearing near a stream, sheltered by pines. While he unsaddled the horses and set up camp, Alara stood nearby, useless and uncertain. She watched him work with wide eyes, taking in every movement as if trying to memorize the steps. Can I help? She finally asked. Can you start a fire? No. Then no, you can't help. He got the fire going, set water to boil, pulled hardtack and dried venison from his saddlebags. It wasn't much, but it was what he had. Alara accepted her portion with murmured thanks and nibbled at it like a bird. They ate in silence. The mountains rose around them, dark shapes against a darkening sky. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled, long and lonely. Alara stiffened. Relax, Darius said. They won't come near the fire. You're certain? I'm alive, aren't I? He tossed another branch onto the flames. Been living up here 8 years. Still got all my fingers and toes. She was quiet for a moment, staring into the fire. The firelight caught in her dark hair turned her skin to gold and shadow. She looked even more out of place here than she had in town, a painting hung in the wrong gallery. Why? She asked suddenly. Why what? Why did you come here? To the mountains? Darius considered not answering. It wasn't her business, but something about the way she asked, not prying, just curious, made him relent. Same reason anyone comes to the frontier, he said. Wanted to leave something behind. What? Does it matter? I suppose not. She wrapped her arms around herself. The temperature was dropping fast, the way it always did in the mountains. I'm sorry for the deception, for all of this. You already apologized. I meant it then, I mean it now. She met his eyes across the fire. I know I'm not what you wanted, what you needed, but I'll try. I promise you that much. Darius studied her. There was something in her face, a determination that didn't match the silk dress or the soft hands. Something hard underneath all that refinement. What are you running from? He asked. Her expression shuddered. I told you. You told me nothing. He leaned forward. I've seen men running from the law, from debts, from war. You've got that same look, like the past is chasing you and you're not sure how much of a head start you've got. Alara was quiet for a long moment. Then, if I tell you, you'll send me back. Maybe, maybe not, but I'll find out eventually. Better it comes from you. She looked at him, weighing something in her mind. Then she reached into her traveling bag, a ridiculous beaded thing that had no business on a mountain trail, and pulled out a small leather journal. She held it out to him. This is what I'm running from. Darius took it. The leather was fine quality, embossed with initials, VH. He opened it to a random page and found columns of numbers, dates, names. It took him a moment to understand what he was looking at. Ledger entries. But not for any legitimate business. These are bribes, he said slowly. Payments to judges, lawmen, politicians. Yes. Where did you get this? I stole it. Her voice was steady now, matter of fact. From Victor Hallstrom. He's a railroad magnate in San Francisco. Very wealthy, very powerful, very married. She paused. I was his mistress for 2 years. He promised me things, marriage, security, a life. All lies. When I tried to leave, he threatened to destroy me, ruin my name, my reputation, make sure I'd never work again. So I took the one thing that could destroy him instead. Darius closed the ledger. You're telling me you robbed one of the richest men in California. I prefer to think of it as claiming payment for services rendered. Does he know you took it? By now, absolutely. She smiled, but there was no humor in it. He'll have noticed within days, and he'll have sent people to find me. Killers. Probably. Or men who might as well be. Hallstrom doesn't do his own dirty work. Darius felt anger building in his chest. Not at her exactly, but at the situation she'd dropped into his lap. So you came to Iron Ridge. To hide. To disappear, she corrected. Who would look for Victor Hallstrom's mistress in a mountain trapper's cabin? It's the last place anyone would expect. Except now I know, and I'm stuck with you. You're stuck with me for 2 weeks. That's what we agreed. She met his eyes. I won't bring trouble to your door, Mr. Boone. If anyone comes looking, I'll leave. I'll lead them away. But please, just give me these 2 weeks. Let me catch my breath. And then I'll figure out what comes next. Darius looked at the ledger in his hands, then at the woman across the fire. She was trouble. Everything about this screamed trouble. The smart thing, the only smart thing, would be to take her back to Iron Ridge tomorrow, put her on that coach, and let her sort out her own mess. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the way she'd gripped those reins, hands blistering but refusing to quit. Maybe it was the steel he'd heard in her voice when she'd said, I won't bring trouble to your door. Like she meant it. Like she'd actually walk into danger to keep her word. Or maybe he was just tired of being alone. 2 weeks, he said finally. But if anyone shows up looking for you, I'm not dying for your mistakes. I wouldn't ask you to. He handed the ledger back. Hide that better. If you're carrying evidence like that, you might as well paint a target on your back. She took it, slipped it back into her bag. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just try not to get us both killed. Much. The second day was harder than the first. They left before dawn, the mountains still dark against a graying sky. Alara was sore and stiff, moving like every muscle had staged a rebellion. But she climbed into the saddle without complaint and kept pace as they pushed deeper into the high country. The terrain grew rougher. The trail, such as it was, narrowed to a thread of hard-packed earth winding between pines and granite. The air thinned. Alara's breathing grew labored. We're climbing, she said, stating the obvious. We are. How much higher? Another 1,000 feet, maybe more. She went quiet, focused on just staying in the saddle. By midday, they'd left the trees behind. The landscape opened into meadows of tough mountain grass, dotted with wildflowers that would be dead in a month. Above them, peaks rose like broken teeth against the sky. Darius pulled to a stop at a stream, let the horses drink. Alara dismounted, or rather, slid out of the saddle with a grace that suggested her legs had stopped working entirely. She landed in the grass and sat there, breathing hard. "You did better today," Darius admitted. "I feel like I've been beaten with a club." "That's just riding. You'll adjust." She looked up at him, sweat-streaked and disheveled, her carefully arranged hair coming loose in dark tendrils. "Do you enjoy this? Being cruel?" The question caught him off guard. "I'm not being cruel. I'm being honest." "There's a difference between honesty and callousness, Mr. Boone." "Not up here, there isn't." He crouched beside the stream, filled his canteen. "You want me to lie? Tell you it'll be easy? That you'll be fine? You won't. The mountains don't care about your feelings, and neither do I. The only thing that matters is whether you can survive what's coming. And you don't think I can. I think you've never had to." He capped the canteen. "I think you've spent your life being protected and provided for, and now you're up here where none of that matters. Silk dresses don't keep you warm, fine manners don't start fires, and every second you spend feeling sorry for yourself is a second you're not learning something that might save your life." Color flooded her cheeks. "You don't know anything about my life." "I know enough." "You know nothing." She stood, swaying slightly. "You think I've been protected? Provided for? I've been a possession, Mr. Boone. A pretty thing on a powerful man's arm, something to be displayed and discarded at will. You want to talk about survival? I've been surviving my entire life, just in a different kind of wilderness." The words hung between them, sharp and unexpected. Darius studied her. There was fire in her eyes now, real anger burning through the exhaustion. It made her look less like porcelain and more like something forged in heat. "Then prove it," he said simply. She blinked. "What?" "Prove you can survive. Show me you're more than silk and softness." He gestured at the stream. "Water's clean. Fill the canteens, then we ride." For a moment he thought she might argue, but she didn't. She just moved to the stream, knelt in the grass, and started working. Her hands were clumsy, her movements uncertain, but she got it done. They rode on. The sun was low when the cabin finally came into view, a dark shape huddled against the mountainside, smoke curling from its chimney. It wasn't much. Single room, rough-hewn logs, a roof that probably leaked when it rained hard, but it had kept Darius alive through 8 winters, and that was more than most men could say about their homes. Elara stared at it in silence. "This is it," Darius said. "Welcome to the Highlands." She dismounted slowly, her legs shaking. "It's small. It keeps the heat in. There's only one room." "I noticed." She turned to look at him, and he saw the fear creeping back into her expression. "Where will I sleep?" "There's a loft. You'll take that. I'll take the floor." He swung down from his horse. "Rules are simple. Pull your weight or leave. Don't touch my traps or my gear. Don't go wandering off alone. You'll get lost or killed, possibly both. And don't expect me to take care of you like some kind of helpless child. Understood?" "Understood." "Good." He started toward the cabin, then paused. "And Miss Vance?" "Yes?" "Welcome to the wilderness. Try not to burn the place down." He didn't wait for her response, just pushed open the cabin door and stepped into the familiar dimness, leaving her standing in the yard with her ridiculous trunk and her even more ridiculous parasol. Behind him, he heard her take a deep breath. Then, quietly, "I can do this." Darius almost smiled. Almost. The first morning, Elara burned the coffee. Not just burned it, created something that resembled tar more than any beverage meant for human consumption. The acrid smell filled the cabin, dragging Darius from sleep with the certainty that something had caught fire. He rolled out of his bedroll, grabbed the pot off the stove, and nearly threw it out the door before remembering that would waste perfectly good coffee grounds. "What did you do?" he demanded. Elara stood near the stove, still in her traveling dress, wrinkled now, stained with trail dust, looking at the ruined pot with something between horror and defiance. "I made coffee, like you showed me last night." "I showed you how to make coffee. That's not coffee. That's something you'd use to strip paint. I followed your instructions exactly." "Then you followed them wrong." He dumped the pot's contents into the dirt outside, steam rising in the cold morning air. "How much did you use?" She hesitated. I... I'm not sure. A handful? A handful. Darius closed his eyes, counted to 10. 2 tablespoons, Miss Vance. I said 2 tablespoons per cup, not a handful. You didn't specify tablespoons. I didn't think I needed to. He thrust the pot at her. Try again, and this time, measure. She took the pot with shaking hands, and he saw something in her face that made his anger deflate slightly. Not tears, she was too proud for that, but a brittle kind of determination that suggested she was barely holding herself together. The coffee, he realized, wasn't really about the coffee. He softened his voice. Look, I know this is all new to you, but up here, mistakes cost. That was a week's worth of grounds you just wasted. So pay attention, learn, and stop trying to prove something. I'm not trying to prove anything. Yes, you are. You're trying to prove you belong here. He met her eyes. You don't. Not yet. Maybe not ever, but you've got 2 weeks to figure it out, so stop rushing and start learning. She nodded, jaw tight. Fine. Show me again. He did. Measured out the grounds, explained the ratio, demonstrated how to judge when the water was hot enough. She watched with fierce concentration, asking no questions, just absorbing every word like her life depended on it. Maybe it did. The second pot came out drinkable. Barely. They ate breakfast in silence, hardtack soaked in coffee, some dried venison, the last of the bread he'd bought in town. Alara picked at her portion, making it last, and Darius realized she'd probably never had a meal this sparse in her life. You'll need to eat more than that, he said. I'm not hungry. Doesn't matter. You'll be working today, and you'll need the fuel. She looked up sharply. Working? That was the deal, wasn't it? You pull your weight or you leave. He stood, brushed crumbs from his shirt. There's wood that needs splitting, water that needs hauling, and traps that need checking. Pick one. I don't know how to do any of those things. Then I guess you'll learn 3 new skills today. He left her sitting at the rough-hewn table, her face pale in the morning light streaming through the cabin's single window. Outside, the mountains were waking up, birds calling, wind stirring the pines, the stream rushing over stones with a sound like distant thunder. Darius breathed it in. This was his world, hard and simple and unforgiving. It had nearly killed him a dozen times, but it had also saved him from the man he'd been before. Out here, the past didn't matter, only survival. Behind him, he heard the cabin door open. Alara stepped out, still in that ridiculous dress, and looked at him expectantly. Wood first, he said. You'll find the axe by the shed. She found it, picked it up, nearly dropped it. It's heavy, she said, sounding surprised. It's an axe. He gestured at the pile of unsplit logs nearby. Wood won't split itself. I know. Watch. He took the axe, selected a log, set it up right on the chopping block. The first swing split it clean in 2, the sound sharp and satisfying. Your turn. Alara approached the block like it might bite her. She picked up one of the smaller logs, set it carefully in place, then lifted the axe with both hands. The first swing was pathetic. The blade bounced off the wood without even leaving a mark. Put your weight into it, Darius instructed. It's not about strength, it's about momentum. Let the axe do the work. She tried again. This time the blade bit in about an inch before getting stuck. She pulled, struggled, finally wrenched it free with a gasp of effort. Better, he lied. It took her 20 minutes to split that first log. By the end of it, she was sweating and breathing hard, her hands red and raw. But she'd done it. Again, Darius said. I can barely hold the axe. Then we'll work on your grip. Again. She shot him a look that might have been hatred, but she picked up another log. They spent the morning that way. Alara swinging the axe with increasingly better form, Darius watching and correcting the pile of split wood growing slowly, painfully slowly, at their feet. When she finally paused to catch her breath, he noticed blood on the axe handle. Let me see your hands. She hid them behind her back. They're fine. They're bleeding. Let me see. Reluctantly, she showed him. Her palms were a mess of broken blisters and raw skin, the kind of damage that came from soft hands meeting hard work. It probably hurt like hell, but she hadn't complained once. You should have said something, he told her. Would you have stopped? No, but I would have given you gloves. He went to the cabin, returned with a tin of salve and strips of cloth. Here, this'll help. She let him bandage her hands, wincing but silent. Up close he could smell lavender, some perfume or soap she'd brought from her old life. It was strange and out of place, like finding a rose growing in a rock pile. Why didn't you tell me it hurt? He asked. Because complaining wouldn't change anything. She met his eyes. Would it? No, he admitted. It wouldn't. Then what would be the point? He had no answer for that. They worked until noon, then Darius called a halt. Elara looked ready to collapse, her face flushed, her carefully arranged hair coming completely undone. But there was something different in her expression now, a kind of grim satisfaction. How much did I split? She asked. He looked at the pile. Maybe a day's worth, if we're careful. That's not very much. No, he agreed, but it's more than you split yesterday. She almost smiled at that. Lunch was cold venison and creek water. Elara ate without comment, then announced she was ready to continue. We're not splitting more wood today, Darius said. Your hands need time to heal. We'll check the traps instead. What kind of traps? The kind that catch things we can eat or sell. Come on. He led her into the forest, following paths only he could see. The traps were scattered across a 5-mile circuit, deadfalls and snares set for rabbits, marten, fox. Some were empty, some had been sprung but the prey had escaped. One held a young rabbit, already dead, its neck broken clean. Elara stared at it, her face going pale. Turn away if you need to, Darius said. No. Her voice was quiet but steady. Show me what to do. He showed her how to reset the trap, how to field dress the rabbit. Quick cuts, efficient movements, no waste. She watched without flinching, though he could see the tension in her jaw. In San Francisco, she said suddenly, meat came wrapped in paper from the butcher. I never thought about this part. Most people don't. He finished with the rabbit, wrapped it in cloth. But this is how it works up here. You want to eat, something has to die. No butcher to do it for you. She nodded slowly. I understand. They checked the rest of the traps, found 2 more rabbits and a marten with a pelt that would fetch good money in town. By the time they returned to the cabin, the sun was low and Elara was limping. What's wrong? Darius asked. Nothing. You're limping. My feet hurt. It's fine. Let me see. Mr. Boone, I assure you, let me see, or I'll assume you're too injured to work tomorrow and you can spend the day in the cabin doing nothing useful. That got her moving. She sat on the porch step and unlaced her boots, delicate leather things completely unsuited for mountain life. When she peeled off her stockings, he saw why she was limping. Her feet were covered in blisters, some broken and bleeding. How long have they been like this? He demanded. Since yesterday. And you didn't say anything. You would have thought I was weak. I would have given you different boots. He went to his trunk, pulled out an old pair he'd stopped wearing years ago. They were too big for him but might fit her. Here, try these. She did. They were enormous on her, but with extra socks they'd work. Better? He asked. Better, she admitted. He cleaned and bandaged her feet the way he'd done her hands, working in silence. This close, he could see the exhaustion etched into her face, the way her shoulders sagged. She'd pushed herself to the breaking point today and beyond. You did well, he said quietly. She looked at him, surprised. I burned the coffee, split barely any wood, and nearly crippled myself. You also didn't quit. That counts for something. Does it? Up here? It counts for everything. Something shifted in her expression. Gratitude, maybe, or recognition. For just a moment, the barrier between them thinned. Then she looked away. I should start dinner. I'll do it tonight. You rest. I thought the deal was I pull my weight. The deal is you don't die in my care. Rest, Miss Vance. Tomorrow we'll try again. She didn't argue, just went inside, climbed the ladder to the loft, and disappeared from view. Darius cooked the rabbits, made a simple stew with some wild onions and the last of his potatoes. When it was ready, he called up to her. No answer. He climbed the ladder, found her curled on the narrow bed, fast asleep. He left her there. ate alone, then sat by the fire and thought about the woman sleeping above him. The silk and steel of her, the determination wrapped in fragility. She wouldn't make it. He knew that. The mountains would break her long before the 2 weeks were up, but at least she was trying. That had to count for something. The next 3 days followed the same brutal pattern. Wake before dawn, coffee that gradually improved from terrible to merely bad. Work until exhaustion, then push further. Alara learned to split wood without destroying her hands, to carry water without spilling half of it, to skin a rabbit without flinching. She also learned to fall, to trip over roots and rocks and her own exhausted feet, to stumble under the weight of firewood or water buckets, to push herself up and keep going because the alternative was admitting defeat. Darius watched her transform. The silk dress disappeared, replaced by a spare shirt and trousers of his she'd hemmed with shaking hands. The elaborate hair came down, braided simply to keep it out of her face. The perfume faded, replaced by the honest smell of sweat and wood smoke. But something else was happening too, something he hadn't expected. She was learning to see the mountains the way he did. One morning, she stopped him on the trapline. "Listen," she whispered. He listened, heard what she'd heard. A branch cracking, too heavy for wind. Something moving in the underbrush. He put a hand on his knife, motioned for her to stay still. A black bear emerged from the trees 30 yards away. Young, maybe 2 years old. It stopped, sniffed the air, looked directly at them. Alara didn't scream, didn't run, just stood frozen, eyes wide. The bear watched them for a long moment, then ambled off into the forest. When it was gone, Alara let out a shaky breath. "What should I have done?" "Exactly what you did. Stay calm. Don't run. Most bears don't want trouble any more than we do." He looked at her with something approaching respect. "You did good. I was terrified. Being terrified is smart. Panicking is stupid. You didn't panic." She smiled. The first real smile he'd seen from her. It transformed her face, made her look younger. "I suppose that's progress." "It is." They walked back to the cabin in comfortable silence. It was a small thing, that shared moment with the bear, but it felt significant, like a wall had cracked. That night, over dinner, Alara finally asked the question he'd been expecting. "Why did you really come here, Mr. Boone?" He looked at her across the table. "I told you, wanted to leave something behind." "What? Does it matter?" "Maybe. Maybe not. But we've been living in the same cabin for almost a week, and I don't know anything about you except you're very good at survival and very bad at patience." Despite himself, Darius almost smiled. "I was a soldier, war between the states, fought for the Union, though I'm not sure it mattered which side. War's war, killing's killing. When it ended, I couldn't go back to who I'd been before. So I came here. To hide? To heal." He poured himself more coffee. "The mountains don't care about what you did before. They just care about what you do now. That seemed easier." Alara nodded slowly. "I understand that." "Do you?" "More than you might think." She traced patterns in the wood grain of the table. "Victor Hallstrom promised me a new life. A fresh start. I was someone else before I met him. Someone with dreams and plans and hope. He took all of that and turned it into something ugly, something I didn't recognize. So you stole his ledger." "So I fought back." She met his eyes. "The only way I knew how. And now you're here." "And now I'm here." She smiled faintly. "Burning coffee and bleeding all over your axes." "You've gotten better at both. Have I?" "Coffee's almost drinkable now." She laughed, a real laugh, surprised and genuine. It filled the cabin, chased away some of the shadows. Darius found himself liking the sound of it. The moment stretched between them, comfortable and strange. Then Alara stood, started gathering the dishes. "I'll clean up." "You don't have to." "I want to. You cooked. It's only fair." He watched her work, moving around the small cabin with increasing familiarity. A week ago, she'd been a stranger. Now she was, what? Not quite a partner, not quite a friend, but something that might survive 2 weeks after all. The thought unsettled him more than it should have. By the end of the first week, Ilara had settled into a rhythm. Mornings meant coffee and breakfast, then whatever work Darius assigned. Afternoons were for the trap line or gathering firewood or any of the 100 small tasks that kept them alive. Evenings were for cooking, cleaning, and the quiet that came with exhaustion. She was getting stronger. Her hands had calloused over, the blisters healing into tough skin. Her arms had developed lean muscle from swinging the axe. Her stamina improved until she could make the full trap circuit without needing to rest. But Darius saw the cracks forming too. She was trying too hard, pushing herself past reasonable limits, refusing to acknowledge pain or exhaustion. When she cut her hand on a skinning knife, she wrapped it without comment and kept working. When she twisted her ankle stepping wrong on a loose rock, she limped through the rest of the day in silence. "You need to slow down," he told her one evening. "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're running yourself into the ground." "I have 6 days left to prove my worth. I don't have time to slow down." "Your worth?" He stared at her. "What are you talking about?" "The deal. 2 weeks, remember? 2 weeks to prove I'm not completely useless. That's what you said." "I said you could stay 2 weeks. I didn't say—" He caught himself, realized what he'd done. "I didn't mean you had to earn your place. I just meant that I had 2 weeks before you sent me back." Her voice was flat. "I understand. And I'm trying to make sure that when those 2 weeks are up, you'll have a reason to let me stay longer." "Miss Vance, it's Ilara. If I'm going to be living here, working beside you, you might as well use my name." "Ilara, then." He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. "You don't have to kill yourself trying to impress me." "Don't I?" She looked at him with those dark eyes that saw too much. "You made it very clear what you think of me. Soft. Useless. A mistake. I'm trying to prove you wrong." "I never said you were useless. You didn't have to. It was in every word, every look. Don't touch my traps. Try not to burn the place down. You expected me to fail. I expected you to struggle. There's a difference." "Is there?" She turned away, started climbing the ladder to the loft. "Good night, Mr. Boone." "It's Darius," he called after her. "If we're using names." She paused, looked back down at him. Something flickered across her face, surprise, maybe, or something softer. "Good night, Darius." He lay awake long after she'd gone to bed, staring at the dying fire and thinking about her words. Had he been that cruel? He'd been honest, yes, direct. But cruel? Maybe. Maybe she was right. Maybe he had expected her to fail, had even wanted her to fail, because that would make the decision easier. Send her back. Go back to his solitude. Forget this whole mess. Except he didn't want to send her back anymore. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Somewhere between the burned coffee and the split wood, between the rabbit snares and the bear sighting, she'd stopped being a burden and started being something else. A presence. A voice in the silence. Someone who made the cabin feel less like a shelter and more like a home. The thought terrified him. The next morning, he found her at the woodpile before dawn, already swinging the axe. Her movements were practiced now, efficient. The blade bit deep with each swing, splitting logs with satisfying cracks. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. She didn't stop working. "Wanted to get an early start." "Ilara, I need to finish this pile before we check the traps. And then there's water to haul, and I noticed the rabbit hutch needs repairs, and—" "Ilara!" He caught the axe mid-swing, his hand over hers on the handle. "Stop." She met his eyes, breathing hard. "Why?" "Because you're right. I did expect you to fail, and I'm sorry for that." The words hung between them, unexpected and raw. Ilara's grip on the axe loosened. "You're apologizing? Don't sound so shocked. I'm capable of admitting when I'm wrong." He released her hand, stepped back. "You've worked hard this past week, harder than I expected, harder than you needed to, and I haven't acknowledged that properly." "I don't need acknowledgement. I need—" "What? What do you need?" "To know I can stay." The words came out quiet, almost desperate. "I need to know that when these 2 weeks are up, I won't be sent back, that I'll be safe here. That's all I need." Darius looked at her, really looked at her. At the exhaustion in her eyes, the determination in her jaw, The way her hands gripped the axe like it was the only solid thing in a shifting world. "You can stay," he said. She blinked. "What?" "The 2 weeks. Forget them. You've proven what you needed to prove. You can stay through the winter if you want, maybe longer. We'll figure it out as we go." Tears welled in her eyes. She blinked them back furiously. "You mean that?" "I don't say things I don't mean." "Why?" Her voice cracked. "Why now?" "Because you're not the person who stepped off that coach. You've changed, and because—" He hesitated, uncomfortable with vulnerability. "Because maybe I've changed too. Having someone here. It's not as bad as I thought it would be." Alara laughed, a wet, shaky sound. "That might be the kindest thing anyone's ever said to me." "Then you've known some real bastards." "I have." She set down the axe, wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Thank you, Darius. You don't know what this means." "I think I do." He gestured at the half-split woodpile. "Now, can we take a break from trying to kill yourself with manual labor? I'd like my help to survive the winter." "Your help?" She smiled. "Is that what I am?" "For now. We'll see what you are by spring." They went inside together, made coffee, sat at the table in comfortable silence while the sun rose over the mountains, painting the snow-capped peaks in shades of gold and pink. It felt like a beginning, but neither of them knew that outside, in the town of Iron Ridge, a well-dressed stranger had arrived asking questions. Questions about a woman, about a mountain trapper who'd taken a bride. Questions that would bring violence and fire to these quiet highlands before the week was out. For now, though, there was just coffee and sunrise and the fragile peace between two people learning to trust each other. It wouldn't last. It never did. The peace lasted 3 more days. 3 days of routine settling into rhythm, of Alara learning to read the mountains the way Darius did, of small moments that felt almost like normalcy. She mastered the coffee, learned to judge when the stew needed more salt or when the bread was ready to come out of the Dutch oven, started anticipating what needed doing before he had to ask. On the 4th day, everything changed. Darius had gone to check the upper traps, the ones set near the snowline where the marten hunting was best. Alara stayed behind to mend a tear in his spare coat, her fingers working the needle with increasing competence. The cabin was warm, the fire crackling softly, and for the first time since arriving, she felt something close to contentment. Then she heard the horses. Multiple horses, coming up the trail. Her hands froze on the needle. Nobody came up here. Darius had said as much. The cabin was too remote, the trail too difficult. The few trappers who worked these mountains kept to their own territories, and traders wouldn't make the climb until spring. She set down the coat and moved to the window, careful to stay back from the glass. Through the pines, she caught glimpses of movement. 4 riders, maybe 5, moving with purpose. Fear crawled up her spine like ice water. She grabbed the ledger from its hiding place under a loose floorboard, shoved it into her jacket. Then she took down the rifle Darius kept by the door, showed her how to load it just yesterday, though she'd never actually fired it, and waited. The riders emerged from the tree line. 5 men, well-dressed for the frontier, their horses too fine for casual travel. The man in front wore a badge that caught the sunlight, but something about him was wrong. The way he sat his horse, the hardness in his face. He looked less like a lawman and more like a killer who'd bought himself some legitimacy. They stopped 30 yards from the cabin. The one with the badge raised his hand in a gesture that might have been greeting or warning. "Hello, the cabin," he called out. His voice was smooth, educated, Eastern maybe. "We're looking for someone. A woman. Goes by Alara Vance. We have reason to believe she might have passed through these parts." Alara's heart hammered against her ribs. She stepped back from the window, mind racing. Darius wouldn't be back for hours. She was alone. And these men, Hallstrom's men, had found her. "Anyone home?" the man called again. "We just want to talk. No trouble intended." The lie was obvious. Men who meant no trouble didn't ride in groups of 5, didn't wear guns like they knew how to use them, didn't have that predatory patience in their voices. Alara made a decision. She opened the door, stepped out onto the porch, with the rifle held loosely but visibly in her hands. "My husband isn't here," she said, pitching her voice higher, rougher. Won't be back till evening. You'll have to come back then. The man with the badge smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. That's all right, ma'am. Maybe you can help us. This woman we're looking for. He pulled a paper from his coat, unfolded it. A sketch, her face rendered in careful detail. She's wanted for theft, dangerous criminal. You seen anyone matching this description? No. The lie came easily. Nobody comes up here but us. You're certain? Pretty woman like that, you'd remember. I'm certain. One of the other men shifted in his saddle. That's a fine rifle for a woman to be holding. Know how to use it? Well enough. Alara kept her voice steady. Mountain lions don't care much if you're a man or woman when they're hungry. The man with the badge, his coat had a name stitched into it. She saw now, Marshal Hayes, studied her with cold calculation. What'd you say your name was? I didn't. Protective, aren't you? Of your privacy. That's why we live up here. Privacy. She took a step forward, still holding the rifle. Now, if you gentlemen don't mind, I've got work to do. Like I said, come back when my husband's here if you need to talk. Hayes made no move to leave. Instead, he dismounted, smooth and deliberate. The other four followed suit. Thing is, ma'am, we've got authorization to search any premises where we suspect our fugitive might be hiding. He pulled another paper from his coat. Federal warrant, signed by a judge in San Francisco. So with all due respect to your privacy, we'll be having a look inside. No, you won't. I'm afraid we will. He took a step toward the cabin. Now you can make this easy, or you can make it hard. But either way, we're going inside. Alara raised the rifle, aimed it square at his chest. I said no. The clearing went very still. Hayes stopped, but his expression didn't change. If anything, he looked pleased. Now that's threatening a federal officer, ma'am. That's a serious crime. So is trespassing. So is harassment. So is riding up to an isolated cabin with 5 armed men and demanding entry. Alara's hands were steady on the rifle, though her heart felt like it might explode. I know what you are. You're no marshal. You're hired killers with a fake badge, and I'll shoot the first man who takes another step. Will you now? Hayes smiled. You ever killed a man before? There's a first time for everything. That's true enough. He nodded to one of his men. Jackson, check the shed. The man peeled off toward the outbuildings. Alara swung the rifle toward him, and Hayes laughed. You can't shoot all of us, sweetheart, and the second you fire that rifle, you've committed assault on a lawman. Then my boys here have every right to defend me. How you think that's going to end? Alara's mind raced. He was right. She could maybe shoot one, but then the others would kill her. And even if by some miracle she survived, what then? They'd search the cabin, find the ledger, and everything would have been for nothing. She needed time, needed Darius, needed something other than this helpless standoff. Fine, she said. Search the shed. But you're not coming in the cabin. Hayes considered this. Fair enough. For now. The man called Jackson disappeared into the shed. Alara heard him moving things around, the clatter of tools. Long minutes passed. Finally, he emerged, shaking his head. Nothing, boss, just trapping gear. Hayes's eyes never left Alara. What about the cabin? I told you. I heard what you told me. But see, I'm thinking you're being awfully protective of that cabin for someone with nothing to hide. He took another step forward. Makes a man curious. Take one more step and I'll shoot you. No, you won't, because you're smart. And smart people know when they're beaten. He gestured to his men. Spread out. If she shoots me, kill her. But try to keep the cabin intact. We need to search it. The men fanned out, hands on their guns. Alara's finger tightened on the trigger, but Hayes was right. She was one woman with one rifle against 5 armed men. The mathematics were brutal and simple. Then she heard it, a sound like distant thunder. Hoofbeats. Coming fast. Darius burst from the tree line on his horse, moving at a full gallop. He took in the scene in an instant, Alara on the porch with the rifle, the 5 men surrounding the cabin, the tension thick as smoke, and didn't slow down. He rode straight at Hayes, forcing the man to dive aside or be trampled. Then he was off the horse, rifle in hand, positioning himself between Alara and the strangers. Who the hell are you? He demanded. Hayes picked himself up, dusting off his coat. Marshal Thomas Hayes, these are my deputies. We're investigating. That's not a marshal's badge. Darius's voice was flat, certain. I've seen enough real ones to know. That's a county deputy badge, probably stolen. And these men aren't deputies, they're hired guns. Hayes's smile finally faded. Careful, mountain man. You're making accusations you can't back up. Try me. Darius worked the rifle's lever, chambering around. I'll ask one more time. Who are you, and what do you want? For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Hayes laughed, a sound without humor. All right, since we're dropping pretenses. He looked past Darius at Alara. Her, we want her, and the ledger she stole. Hand them both over, and we'll leave peacefully. No, Darius said. That's not your decision to make. She's my wife, my cabin, my land. Makes it exactly my decision. Hayes shook his head slowly. You don't know what you're protecting. That woman is a thief and a whore. She stole property worth more than you'll make in 10 lifetimes. The man she stole from, he's powerful, connected. You really want to make an enemy of him for some woman you barely know. Don't care who he is, she's under my protection now. Noble. Stupid, but noble. Hayes gestured to his men. Last chance. Give us the woman and the ledger, or we take them. Darius's answer was to raise the rifle to his shoulder. You're welcome to try. The clearing exploded into violence. Hayes dove for cover as Darius fired, the shot kicking up dirt where the fake marshal had been standing. The other 4 men scattered, reaching for their weapons. Alara dropped behind the porch railing, her own rifle coming up. Get inside, Darius shouted at her. Not without you. A bullet smashed into the cabin wall beside her head, spraying splinters. Another punch through the window, glass shattering. Darius returned fire, driving 2 of the men behind a fallen log. Inside now! He fired again, working the lever with practiced speed. Get the ammunition and whatever you can carry. We're leaving. Alara scrambled through the door, glass crunching under her boots. Her hand shook as she grabbed the ammunition box, the spare rifle, the bag of supplies Darius kept packed for emergencies. Outside, the gunfire was continuous now, sharp cracks echoing off the mountains. She emerged to find Darius pinned down behind the woodpile, 2 of the men advancing from different angles. He was good, better than good, but he was outnumbered, and they knew it. Without thinking, Alara raised her rifle and fired. The recoil nearly knocked her down. The shot went wide, missing the man she'd aimed at by a good 3 feet, but it was enough to make him dive for cover, breaking his advance. Darius used the distraction to shoot another man in the leg, dropping him screaming to the ground. Can you ride? He called to her. Yes. Then get to the horses. Go! She ran, staying low, bullets kicking up dirt around her feet. Made it to where the horses were tied, grabbed the reins. Darius's gelding was dancing nervously, spooked by the gunfire. Easy, she told him, her voice shaking. Easy, boy. Darius backed toward her, still firing. Mount up! She swung into the saddle just as one of Hayes's men broke from cover, rushing them. Darius turned, fired point blank. The man went down hard. Then Darius was on his horse, kicking it into motion. Ride! Into the trees! They crashed into the forest, branches whipping past, the horses scrambling for footing on the steep slope. Behind them, more gunfire. A bullet clipped a tree beside Alara's head, bark exploding. She leaned low over the horse's neck, gave him his head, let him pick the path. The forest was a blur of green and brown, the sound of pursuit loud in her ears. Darius led them deeper into the wilderness, following trails only he knew. They rode hard for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, putting distance between them and the cabin. Finally, he pulled to a stop in a small ravine, hidden by thick pines. Both of them were breathing hard, the horses lathered with sweat. Are you hurt? He asked immediately. Alara checked herself. No, you? I'm fine. He was already scanning their back trail, listening. They'll follow. We need to keep moving. Where? Higher. Into the real mountains. They're lowlanders. They won't last long up there. He looked at her, his expression hard. I need to know everything. Right now. No more secrets. What's in that ledger that's worth killing for? Alara pulled it from her jacket with shaking hands. Evidence of bribes, murders, land fraud. Victor Hallstrom built his empire on corruption and violence. This proves it all. Judges, politicians, lawmen, he owns them. And anyone who got in his way, she met Darius's eyes. They disappeared, or had accidents, or killed themselves. Except they didn't. Hallstrom had them murdered, and this ledger documents every one. Darius took the book, flipped through pages. His jaw tightened. How many? Dozens. Maybe more. The ledger only goes back 5 years. And you took this from him. I had to. It was the only leverage I had. The only proof that he wasn't untouchable. Her voice cracked. I know I brought this on you. On us. I'm sorry. I never wanted... Save it. He handed the ledger back. We need to move. You stay close. Do exactly what I say. Understood? She nodded. They rode on, climbing higher into the mountains. The air grew thinner, colder. Snow appeared in patches, then sheets. The trees changed from pine to twisted scrub barely clinging to the rocky slopes. By nightfall, they were well above the tree line, exposed to a wind that cut like knives. Darius found a shallow cave, barely more than an overhang, and they made camp without fire. Too visible, he explained. Too easy to track. They huddled together for warmth, sharing a single blanket, eating cold jerky and hard biscuits. Below them, the world was darkness and stars, beautiful and merciless. They'll burn the cabin, Elara said quietly. Won't they? Probably. I'm sorry. For all of it. Stop apologizing. Darius's arm was around her shoulders, sharing what heat he could. You did what you had to do. Can't fault someone for fighting back. Even if it costs you everything? I've lost everything before. Survived it then. I'll survive it now. He was quiet for a moment. Besides, it was just a cabin. Wood and nails. We can build another. We? He looked at her in the darkness. Unless you're planning on going back to San Francisco. No. The word was immediate, certain. Never. Then we. He settled back against the rock. Try to sleep. Tomorrow's going to be harder. Elara closed her eyes, but sleep was impossible. Every sound might be pursuit. Every shadow might be death. And below them, somewhere in that darkness, 5 men were hunting them with professional patience. She thought about the ledger pressed against her ribs, about the names written in careful script, the amounts, the crimes documented in neat columns like any business ledger, death and corruption reduced to double-entry bookkeeping. She'd thought taking it would be enough, thought the truth would be its own weapon, but truth needed someone willing to wield it, and she'd been naive enough to believe justice still existed for men like Hallstrom. Now she knew better. Justice was whatever men with money said it was. And if you wanted real justice, you had to take it yourself. The thought should have frightened her. Instead, it felt like clarity. Morning came cold and gray. They ate quickly, wordlessly, then mounted up. Darius led them along a razor-thin trail carved into the mountainside, the drop on one side sheer and fatal. Elara tried not to look down, tried not to think about what would happen if the horse stumbled, just focused on the man ahead of her, on following his path exactly. They were halfway across when they heard the shout. Below them, perhaps a mile down the mountain, figures moved. 5 of them, still following, still hunting. They're persistent, Darius muttered. I'll give them that. Can we outrun them? Not on this terrain. Horses are already exhausted. He studied the slope above them, calculation in his eyes. But maybe we don't have to. What are you thinking? There's a pass up ahead. Narrow. Good defensive position. We hole up there, make them come to us on our terms. He looked at her. You remember how to use that rifle? I think so. You're going to have to do better than think. If they reach us, you'll need to shoot, and not just to scare them, to kill. Can you do that? Elara thought about Victor Hallstrom, about the things he'd done, the people he'd destroyed, about the men chasing them now, hired killers who'd burn and murder without hesitation. Yes, she said. I can do that. They reached the pass by midday, a gap between 2 massive boulders barely wide enough for a horse. Beyond it, the trail continued up toward the peaks, but anyone trying to follow would have to come through single file, exposed. Darius positioned them on either side of the gap, behind cover. They'll try to rush us. First man through, you take him. Don't hesitate. Don't think. Just shoot. What about you? I'll handle the rest. He checked his ammunition. And Alara, whatever happens, don't let them take you alive. You understand what I'm saying? She understood. She pulled out the small knife he'd given her weeks ago, now worn smooth from use, held it up so he could see. I understand. He almost smiled. Good girl. They waited. Minutes stretched into an hour. The sun climbed higher, and with it the temperature, but up here it was still cold enough to see your breath. Alara's hands cramped around the rifle. Her legs ached from crouching, but she didn't move. Finally they came. Hayes led them, walking his horse carefully up the trail. He'd lost the pretense of civility now. His face was hard with purpose, a rifle across his saddle. Behind him, the 3 remaining men spread out as much as the terrain allowed. They stopped just out of rifle range. Boone, Hayes called. We know you're up there. This doesn't have to end bloody. Just give us the woman and the ledger and we'll leave. You can go back to your mountain. No harm done. Darius didn't answer, just waited. Think about it, Hayes continued. You're outnumbered, outgunned. We can wait you out or we can come up there and take what we want. Either way, you lose. Be smart, mountain man. Save yourself. Still no answer. Hayes's patience cracked. Fine. Have it your way. He gestured to his men. Jackson, Reeves, flank left. Miller, you're with me. We go on 3. They moved fast, professional. 2 men breaking toward the rocks on the left, trying to get an angle. Hayes and Miller charging straight up the middle. Darius fired first, the shot echoing like thunder. Miller went down, blood blooming on his chest. Alara sighted on Hayes, forced herself to breathe, and squeezed the trigger. The rifle bucked. Hayes's horse screamed and went down, throwing its rider. Hayes rolled, came up shooting. Bullets smashed into the rocks around Alara, stone chips cutting her face. She fired again, missed, worked the lever, fired. This time Hayes stumbled, grabbed his shoulder. On the left, the other 2 men had found cover and were laying down, suppressing fire. Darius was pinned, unable to get a clear shot. Then one of them made a mistake, broke cover to advance. Darius's rifle cracked once, and the man dropped. That left Jackson and Hayes, 2 against 2. Jackson tried to flank around, climbing the rocks. Alara tracked him with the rifle, but the angle was wrong. She couldn't get a shot without exposing herself. Darius, she called. Left side. He swung his rifle around, fired. Jackson ducked, but it forced him back down. Hayes used the distraction to rush forward, making it to the cover of a boulder just 20 feet from the pass. Too close. Way too close. Last chance, he shouted. Send out the woman, or I'm coming through there shooting. Darius looked at Alara across the gap. Something passed between them, recognition, understanding. They'd made their stand, now they'd see it through. Come ahead, Darius called back. We'll be waiting. Hayes laughed, wild, almost delighted. Stupid mountain trash could have lived. He burst from cover, rifle blazing. Darius fired, hit him in the leg. Hayes went down but kept shooting, bullets punching through the air in a continuous roar. Alara stood, exposed herself fully, aimed carefully at the fallen man, and fired. The bullet took Hayes in the chest. He looked surprised, more than hurt, looked down at the spreading red stain, looked back up at Alara. Well, he said. Then he died. Jackson broke, ran, scrambled down the trail, slipping and sliding, desperate to escape. Darius let him go. Let him run. Let him tell Hallstrom what happened here. They stood in the aftermath, smoke and cordite hanging in the cold air. 4 men dead on the mountainside. A 5th fleeing back toward civilization with a story about the mountain trapper and his bride who'd fought like demons. Alara lowered the rifle, her hands shaking now that it was over. She'd killed a man. Actually killed him. The realization was settling in, cold and heavy. Darius crossed to her, gently took the rifle from her hands. You all right? I don't know. She looked at Hayes' body. I killed him. You defended yourself. Us. That's different. Is it? Yes. He turned her to face him, his hands on her shoulders. Listen to me. What we did here, it was necessary. They would have killed us, taken you back to Hallstrom, and you know what would have happened then. I know. Her voice was small. I thought I'd feel different, triumphant or justified or something, but I just feel tired. That's how you know you're still human. He pulled her against him, and she let herself lean into his strength. Come on, we need to move before more show up. Where are we going? Deeper, higher, somewhere they can't follow. He looked at the bodies, the evidence of violence scattered across the rocks. And then we're going to figure out how to end this. Because you were right, we can't run forever. Eventually, we need to take the fight to Hallstrom himself. Alara pulled back, looked up at him. How? That ledger. It's evidence. Real evidence. We get it to the right people, newspapers, federal marshals, someone Hallstrom doesn't own, and we destroy him with his own words. You think it'll work? I think it's our only chance. He managed a grim smile. Besides, I'm getting real tired of people shooting at my cabin. Despite everything, Alara laughed. It was a broken sound, but it was real. They gathered what they could from the fallen men, ammunition, supplies, a better rifle for Alara. Then they mounted up and rode higher into the mountains, leaving the dead behind. The fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. But for the first time since fleeing San Francisco, Alara felt something besides fear. She felt ready. They rode for 2 days straight, stopping only when the horses could go no further. The mountains closed around them like the walls of a cathedral, massive, indifferent, beautiful in their cruelty. Snow fell intermittently, erasing their tracks, and Darius pushed them higher still, into country so remote that even other trappers avoided it. On the third morning, they found what he was looking for. A hunter's shelter carved into the mountainside, half cave, half crude construction of stacked stone and timber. It had been abandoned for years, maybe decades, but the structure was sound. Most importantly, it was invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. We'll rest here, Darius said, dismounting stiffly. Tend the horses, get warm, then we plan. Alara slid from her saddle, every muscle screaming protest. She'd learned to ride competently, but 3 days of hard travel had pushed her past competence into pure endurance. Her hands were cracked and bleeding again. Her face was windburned. Her body felt like one massive bruise. But she was alive. They both were. Inside, the shelter smelled of old smoke and animal musk, but it was dry and out of the wind. Darius got a fire going while Alara tended the horses, rubbing them down with handfuls of dried grass, checking their hooves for stones. Small tasks, familiar now, grounding her in routine when everything else was chaos. When she came back inside, Darius had coffee brewing and was studying a rough map he'd sketched on a piece of bark with charcoal. We're here, he said, pointing to a mark high in the peaks. Iron Ridge is about 30 miles that way. Sacramento may be 60 beyond that. Can we make it to Sacramento? Not before winter. Snow will close the passes in a few weeks, maybe less. He traced a line with his finger. But there's another option. Federal Marshal has an office in Miners Gulch, about 40 miles northeast. Small settlement, but it's on the telegraph line. We get the ledger to him, he can send word to Sacramento, San Francisco, maybe even Washington. Assuming he's not on Hallstrom's payroll. That's the risk. Darius looked up at her. But I knew the marshal there. Fought with him during the war. Jacob Thornton. If any man can't be bought, it's him. You trust him? With my life. Question is whether you do. Alara considered. They'd come this far on trust, her trusting Darius to protect her, him trusting her to be worth protecting. Another leap of faith seemed almost inevitable. Then we go to Miners Gulch, she said. How long will it take? 4 days if we push hard, maybe 5. He folded the makeshift map. But we'll need supplies, food, ammunition, warmer clothes, winter gear. We can't go back to Iron Ridge. No, but there's a trading post about a day from here. Small operation run by a Swede named Larson. He doesn't ask questions, doesn't care about other people's business. We can resupply there. Alara nodded, too tired to do more. She accepted the coffee Darius handed her, wrapped her frozen hands around the tin cup, and let the warmth seep into her bones. For a while they sat in silence. The fire crackled. Outside, wind howled around the rocks, promising snow. It felt like the end of the world up here, isolated, harsh, strangely peaceful. "You did well," Darius said finally. "In the fight, most people freeze up their first time. You didn't. I was terrified. Being terrified and doing it anyway, that's courage. The other kind's just stupidity." He poked at the fire. "That man you shot, Hayes, you going to be all right with that?" "I don't know." Alara stared into her coffee. "I keep seeing his face, the way he looked when the bullet hit, surprised, like he couldn't believe I'd actually done it." "Probably couldn't. Men like him, they think women are soft, easy prey. You showed him different." "Is that supposed to make me feel better?" "No. Killing someone should never feel good. Necessary, maybe, justified, but not good." He was quiet for a moment. "The men I killed in the war, I remember every face, every name when I knew it. They haunt me sometimes, in the quiet moments. But I live with it because I know what the alternative was. They'd have killed me, killed my brothers in arms. Sometimes the choice isn't between right and wrong. It's between bad and worse." Alara looked at him across the fire. In the flickering light, his face was all hard angles and shadows, the face of a man who'd seen too much violence and learned to carry it like a weight that never got lighter. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Letting me stay? If you'd sent me back on that coach, none of this would have happened. Maybe. Or maybe Hallstrom's men would have caught you in Iron Ridge and killed you there. Maybe you'd be dead in an alley somewhere and I'd never know." He met her eyes. "I don't deal in regrets. I made a choice. You made a choice. Now we live with the consequences. Even if the consequence is dying on a mountain, even then," he smiled faintly, "though I'd prefer we didn't." Despite everything, Alara found herself smiling back. "Me too." They finished their coffee in comfortable silence. Then Darius stood, stretched, and started checking their weapons, cleaning rifles, counting ammunition, testing the action on each piece. Alara watched him work with the efficiency of long practice. "Teach me," she said suddenly. He looked up. "Teach you what?" "All of it. How to shoot properly, how to reload faster, how to fight." She stood, moved closer. "I got lucky in that pass. We both know it. If I'm going to survive what's coming, I need to be better than lucky." Darius studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "All right. But we do it my way. No arguments." "No arguments." They spent the rest of the day on lessons. He showed her how to hold the rifle properly, how to sight along the barrel without closing one eye, how to judge distance and wind. They practiced loading and reloading until her hands moved without thinking. He taught her to shoot from different positions, standing, kneeling, prone, and how to use cover effectively. By evening, Alara was exhausted but competent. Not expert, but no longer the woman who'd nearly dropped the rifle from its weight. "Better," Darius admitted. "You might actually hit something now." "High praise." "I don't believe in false praise. You're better. You're not good yet. But you're better." They ate a sparse dinner of dried meat and hard biscuits, then settled in for the night. Darius took first watch, sitting near the entrance with his rifle across his knees. Alara tried to sleep but found her mind racing. "Darius?" she said into the darkness. "Yeah? Why did you really help me? The truth this time." He was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Then, "You remember that deer I told you about? The one caught in the trap? You said it kicked you. Broke my rib. Hurt like hell." He shifted position. "After I freed it, I watched it run off into the forest. Wounded, probably wouldn't survive the winter, and I thought, what was the point? All I'd done was delay the inevitable. Nature would kill it just as surely as that trap would have." "But you still freed it." "I did. Because even if it was going to die anyway, it deserved the chance to die free, on its own terms." He looked back at her. "You reminded me of that deer, trapped, wounded, probably not going to make it, but fighting anyway. And I thought you deserved the chance to die free too. If it came to that." Alara's throat tightened. "I'm not planning on dying." "Good. Neither am I." He turned back to his watch. Now get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be hard. She closed her eyes, and this time sleep came. They left at dawn, descending carefully from their high refuge toward the trading post. The journey took them through a landscape of stunning desolation. Granite cliffs that dropped away into nothing, frozen waterfalls hanging like sculptures, valleys so deep the sun never reached their floors. Alara had thought she'd grown accustomed to the mountains, but this was different. This was the true wilderness, the place where human presence was barely tolerated and never permanent. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. They reached Larson's post by late afternoon. It was a ramshackle collection of buildings huddled in a narrow valley, smoke rising from a stone chimney. A few horses were tied outside, and Alara could hear voices. Men, multiple ones. Darius pulled up short, his hand going to his rifle. Too many people. Maybe it's just traders. Maybe. But he didn't sound convinced. Stay here. I'll check it out. No. Alara drew her own rifle. We do this together. He looked at her, seemed about to argue, then nodded. Together. But you follow my lead. They approached cautiously, angling to get a view through the trading post's greasy window. Inside, Alara could see 4 men, rough types, trappers, or miners by their look. And behind the counter, a large man with a graying beard who had to be Larson. Nothing obviously wrong, but Darius remained tense. Something's off, he muttered. How can you tell? Larson's scared. See how he's standing? Hands below the counter, weight on his back foot. He's ready to run or fight. Before Alara could respond, the door opened and one of the men stepped out. He saw them immediately, and his hand dropped to his gun. Well, well, he called back inside. Got company. The other 3 emerged. They spread out with the practiced ease of men who'd done this before. In the lead was a wiry man with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow and eyes like chipped flint. Darius Boone, he said, and it wasn't a question. We've been waiting for you. Darius's rifle came up. Don't know you. Name's Garrett. Work for Victor Hallstrom, same as the men you killed up in the pass. He smiled without humor. Hayes was my brother. Alara's heart sank. Of course Hallstrom would send more men. Probably had them staged all over the territory waiting. Your brother tried to kill us, Darius said flatly. Got what he earned. Maybe so, but family's family. I'm here to settle accounts. Garrett's hand hovered over his pistol. You can make this easy or hard, but either way, I'm leaving with the woman and that ledger. Not happening. Then I guess it's hard. Garrett's eyes flicked to Alara. You must be something special, girl. All this trouble for one horror and a book. Alara felt anger flash through her fear. I'm not a whore. That's not what Hallstrom says. Says you spread your legs for 2 years, then robbed him when you got bored. Sounds like a whore to me. Enough, Darius said, his voice hard as iron. You came for a fight. Let's have it, but leave her out of your mouth. Garrett laughed. Protective. I like that. Makes it more fun when I kill you in front of her. The tension stretched like a wire pulled too tight. 4 against 2. Bad odds, but not impossible. Alara's hands tightened on her rifle. Then Larson's voice came from the doorway. You boys want to kill each other. Do it somewhere else. I don't need blood on my floors. Stay out of this, old man, Garrett said without looking back. Can't do that. Darius is a friend, and I don't much like the way you've been treating my hospitality. Larson stepped fully into view, and he was holding a shotgun, an old double barrel that looked like it could take down a buffalo. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to mount up and ride out, and we're going to forget this ever happened. There's 4 of us, one of Garrett's men said. There's one of me with a shotgun loaded with buckshot. At this range, I'll cut 2 of you in half before you even draw. Question is which 2? Larson smiled, showing gap teeth. Anyone want to volunteer? Nobody moved. Garrett's jaw worked like he was chewing something bitter. This isn't over. Probably not, Larson agreed. But it's over for today. Now get. For a moment, Alara thought Garrett might push it. Might decide killing them was worth dying for. But then he spat in the dirt and turned to his men. Mount up. We'll catch them on the trail. They left, climbing onto their horses with deliberate slowness, making it clear they were choosing to leave, not being driven off. Garrett was the last to go. He looked at Alara with something that made her skin crawl. "See you soon, sweetheart. Real soon." Then they were gone, hoofbeats fading into the distance. Larson lowered the shotgun. "Get inside, quickly." They followed him into the trading post. It was cramped and dark, smelling of tobacco and old leather and a dozen other things. Larson barred the door behind them. "They'll be back," he said. "Tonight, maybe tomorrow, but they'll be back." "I know." Darius extended his hand. "Thanks for the help, Carl." "Don't thank me yet. I just made myself a target, too." But he shook Darius's hand warmly. "What kind of trouble you gotten yourself into, old friend?" "The worst kind. The kind that comes with money and power behind it." Larson looked at Alara. "You must be the woman they're hunting, the one who stole from Hallstrom." "I am." "That ledger they mentioned, it real?" "Very real." "Good. Been hearing stories about Hallstrom for years. Man's a poison, needs to be stopped." Larson moved to a shelf, started pulling down supplies. "You'll need food, ammunition, warm gear. Take what you need, no charge." "Carl, no charge," Larson repeated firmly. "I'm too old and too far from civilization to care about making enemies. Besides, any enemy of Hallstrom's is a friend of mine." They gathered supplies quickly: dried meat, coffee, beans, ammunition for both rifles. Larson threw in a heavy wool coat for Alara and a pair of snowshoes for each of them. "You're heading to Miner's Gulch?" he asked. "How'd you know?" "Only place that makes sense. Thornton's a good man. He'll help if anyone can." Larson drew a quick map. "Take the North Ridge, longer, but Garrett and his boys will expect you to go through Miller's Gap. You'll have maybe a half-day head start if you leave now." "We owe you," Darius said. "Just stop Hallstrom. That'll be payment enough." Larson clasped Darius's shoulder. "And Boone, watch yourself. Garrett's not like his brother. Hayes was a blunt instrument. Garrett's a knife in the dark. He'll come at you when you least expect it." They loaded their supplies and left through the back, taking a trail that led north into increasingly rough country. Behind them, the trading post disappeared into the growing darkness. They rode hard through the night, trusting the horses to find footing on trails that were barely visible. The temperature dropped steadily, and snow began to fall, light at first, then heavier. Within hours, the world was white and trackless. "Good," Darius said. "Snow will hide our trail. It'll also slow us down." "Can't be helped. Keep moving." By dawn, they were deep in the high country, following a ridge that ran like a spine between two valleys. The wind was brutal up here, driving snow sideways, cutting through even their heavy coats. Alara's face went numb. Her fingers wouldn't quite close properly, but she kept riding. Around midday, Darius pulled to a stop. "Someone's following us." Alara turned in her saddle, scanning their back trail, saw nothing but snow and rock. "How can you tell?" "Birds went quiet about a mile back, and look," he pointed to a distant ridge. "Disturbed snow. Someone crossed there maybe an hour ago." "Garrett. Has to be. He's tracking us somehow. But the snow should have covered our trail." "Should have. Unless he's got a tracker who's better than the weather." Darius considered. "We need to either lose him or deal with him. Can't have him dogging us all the way to Miner's Gulch." "How do we lose him in this?" "We don't. So we deal with him." He turned his horse off the ridge, heading down into a narrow ravine. "There's a place up ahead, a bottleneck. We'll set up there, wait for him. End this." The ravine narrowed until it was barely wide enough for a horse. The walls rose steeply on either side, cutting off the wind but also any escape route. It was a perfect killing ground. Darius positioned them on opposite sides, hidden behind boulders with good sight lines. Then they waited. An hour passed, then another. The snow continued to fall, piling up in drifts. Alara's legs cramped from crouching, but she didn't move, didn't make a sound. Then she heard it. Hoofbeats, slow and cautious. Coming closer. Garrett appeared at the ravine's entrance, alone. He'd sent his men somewhere else, or maybe left them behind. He rode with his rifle out, scanning the rocks with predator's eyes. He was halfway through when Darius stepped out, rifle aimed center mass. "That's far enough." Garrett stopped, didn't seem surprised. "Boone, figured you'd try something like this." "Where are your men?" "Circling around. They'll be here in about 5 minutes." Garrett smiled. You picked a good spot for an ambush. Problem is, so did I. You're bluffing. Maybe. Want to bet your life on it? Garrett's hand was still on his rifle, but he hadn't raised it. Here's the thing, Boone. I don't actually care about you. You killed my brother, sure, but Hayes was an idiot. Probably had it coming. All I want is the woman and the ledger. Give them to me, and you can walk away. Live to trap another season. Not happening. Why? She worth dying for? A woman you've known, what, a few weeks? She's nobody to you. She's under my protection. That makes her somebody. Garrett shook his head. You mountain types and your codes. Going to get you killed one day. He shifted in his saddle and Alara saw his grip tighten on the rifle. Last chance. Walk away. No. Fine. Garrett moved fast, bringing the rifle up. Darius was faster. His shot took Garrett in the chest, punching him backward out of the saddle. The man hit the ground hard, blood spreading across the snow, but he wasn't dead. Not yet. He rolled, brought up a pistol Alara hadn't seen, and fired. The bullet caught Darius high on the left shoulder, spinning him around. He went down hard. Alara didn't think, just moved, raised her rifle and shot Garrett again. This time he stayed down. She scrambled to Darius, her hands shaking. Blood was soaking through his coat, spreading fast, too fast. How bad? He gasped. She pulled open his coat, saw the entry wound. The bullet had gone clean through, which was good, but the bleeding was heavy, which wasn't. You'll live, she said, hoping it was true. Can you ride? Have to. He struggled to sit up, went pale. His men, if they're really out there, then we move. Now! She helped him to his feet, got him back on his horse. The effort left him breathing hard, sweat on his face despite the cold. They rode out of the ravine, Alara leading both horses now. Darius slumped in his saddle, one hand pressed to his shoulder, the other gripping the saddle horn. Behind them, she heard shouts. Garrett's men, coming at the sound of gunfire. She kicked her horse into a gallop, and they ran. The next hours blurred together, riding through snow that got deeper with every mile. Darius growing weaker, swaying in the saddle. Alara watching their back trail, expecting pursuit at any moment. By nightfall, they'd put maybe 10 miles between them and the ravine. It wasn't enough. Would never be enough. But Darius couldn't go any further. She found a shallow cave, got him inside, built a fire despite the risk. The wound needed tending, and if Garrett's men found them now, at least they'd die warm. She cleaned the wound as best she could with melted snow and strips torn from her shirt. The bullet had missed bone and major blood vessels, pure luck, but infection was a real risk. She packed the wound with moss the way Darius had taught her, then bound it tight. You did good, he mumbled, fever already setting in. Rest. Save your strength. Alara. He grabbed her hand, his grip surprisingly strong. If I don't make it, you're going to make it. If I don't, he continued stubbornly, you take the ledger to Thornton. You finish this. Promise me. I promise. She squeezed his hand. But you're going to be there to see it. He smiled faintly. Stubborn woman. I learned from the best. He drifted off, and Alara sat by the fire, rifle across her knees, listening to the night. Outside, the wind howled like something wounded. Snow continued to fall, erasing the world. She thought about Garrett, dead in the ravine, the second man she'd killed. It should have bothered her more than it did, but all she felt was a grim satisfaction. One less threat, one less obstacle between them and safety. Somewhere out there, Garrett's men were hunting them. Somewhere beyond that, Victor Hallstrom was pulling strings, sending more killers, more money, more pressure. But she was done running, done being afraid, done being the prey. When Darius woke, and he would wake, she'd make sure of it. They'd finish this journey, get the ledger to Thornton, bring down Hallstrom's empire, and if more men came for them, she'd kill them too. The thought should have frightened her. Instead, it felt like power. She fed the fire and watched Darius sleep and waited for morning. Dawn came gray and bitter. Darius woke shivering, his face flushed with fever. Alara had kept the fire burning through the night, feeding it carefully to conserve their dwindling fuel, but the cold still crept in like a living thing. How do you feel? She asked, pressing her hand to his forehead. Hot. Too hot. Like I got shot. He tried to sit up, grimaced. How long was I out? Most of the night, we need to move. Your wound needs proper care, and we can't stay here. Garrett's men? Haven't seen them, but they're out there. She helped him drink some melted snow, then checked his bandage. The bleeding had slowed, but the wound was inflamed, angry red spreading from the edges, infection setting in despite her efforts. Darius saw her expression. Bad? We need to get you to Miner's Gulch today. Don't think I can ride that far. You don't have a choice. Her voice was harder than she intended, but fear made it sharp. You die, I die. So you're going to get on that horse, and you're going to stay in that saddle, no matter what. Understood? He almost smiled. Yes, ma'am. Getting him mounted took 10 agonizing minutes. Every movement sent fresh pain lancing through his shoulder, but he gritted his teeth and endured. By the time Alara swung into her own saddle, he was pale and breathing hard, but upright. They rode north through a landscape transformed by snow. The world was white and silent, the only sounds their horses' labored breathing and the creak of leather. Darius slumped forward, barely conscious, and Alara led both horses, her eyes constantly scanning for threats. By midday, they'd covered maybe 5 miles. Not enough. Nowhere near enough. And Darius was getting worse, mumbling fever dreams swaying dangerously in the saddle. Then she saw them. 3 riders emerging from the tree line about a mile behind, Garrett's remaining men still hunting. Darius? She shook his arm. We've got company. He lifted his head, focused with visible effort, saw the riders. Can't outrun them. Not like this. Then what do we do? He looked around, his fevered eyes taking in the terrain. They were on a narrow trail that wound along the base of a steep slope. Above them, the mountain rose in tiers of snow and rock. Below, a sharp drop into a valley. There, he said, pointing up the slope. That overhang. Snow's unstable. Alara followed his gesture and understood immediately. A massive cornice of snow hung over the trail, held in place by nothing but luck and physics. One good impact, and the whole thing would come down. An avalanche, she said. Exactly. We get past that point, then trigger it. Bury them. That'll bury us too if we're not clear. Then we'd better be clear. He straightened in the saddle, some of his old steel returning. Can you shoot well enough to hit that overhang from a distance? She looked at the target, judged the range. 200 yards, maybe more. Difficult shot even for someone experienced. For her? Nearly impossible. I can try. That'll have to do. He kicked his horse forward. Come on, we need to get past the kill zone. They pushed the horses harder, racing along the narrow trail. Behind them, the 3 riders had closed the distance to maybe half a mile. Close enough that Alara could make out details. The lead rider was tall and broad, carrying a rifle across his saddle. The other 2 flanked him, spreading out to cover more ground. Darius urged them on, past the danger point, around a bend that would give them cover. When they were clear, he pulled up, nearly falling from the saddle. Here, this is the spot. He slid down, staggered, caught himself against a tree. Set up over there, behind those rocks. Wait for them to reach the overhang, then shoot. Alara dismounted, helped him to cover. His breathing was ragged now, his face ashen under the fever flush. She got him settled with his rifle, then took her position behind the rocks he'd indicated. The 3 riders came on, unhurried but inexorable. They knew their quarry was wounded, desperate. They had time. Alara sighted along her rifle, aimed at the snow cornice. Her hands were steady, steadier than they'd been in the past when she'd shot Hayes, steadier than in the ravine with Garrett. Fear had burned away into something colder, harder. The riders entered the kill zone, 200 yards away, directly beneath the unstable snow. She took a breath, let it out slowly, squeezed the trigger. The rifle cracked, the recoil punching into her shoulder. The bullet struck high, kicking up a spray of snow but missing the critical point. The riders looked up, startled, started to spur their horses. Alara worked the lever, aimed again, fired. This shot hit true. The bullet punched into the cornice's weak point, and for a moment nothing happened. Then, with a sound like distant thunder, the snow began to move. It started slowly, a crack, a shift, then faster, gathering mass and momentum, tons of snow and ice cascading down the slope in a white wave of destruction. The riders saw it coming, tried to run, but they were directly in its path and there was nowhere to go. The avalanche hit them like the fist of an angry god. Horses and men disappeared under the churning white torrent, swallowed whole. The roar was deafening, echoing off the mountains, going on and on. When it finally stopped, the trail was buried under 20 feet of snow. Nothing moved. Nothing lived. Alara lowered her rifle, her ears ringing from the gunshot and the avalanche both. 3 more men dead, and this time she'd killed them all with a single bullet. "Good shot," Darius said weakly from behind her. She turned to find him slumped against the rocks, barely conscious. "We need to keep moving." "In a minute, just need a minute." "We don't have a minute." She went to him, checked his wound. The bandage was soaked through with blood and fluid, infection spreading fast. If they didn't get help soon, the bullet wound wouldn't matter. The fever would kill him. She got him back on his horse through sheer willpower and desperation. Then they rode on, leaving the avalanche behind, the snow already beginning to settle over the evidence of what she'd done. The afternoon stretched into evening. Darius drifted in and out of consciousness, mumbling names Alara didn't recognize, fellow soldiers maybe, or family long dead. She kept them moving, following the map Larson had drawn, praying they were headed in the right direction. As the sun touched the horizon, she saw it, smoke rising from a valley ahead, buildings, crude but solid, Miner's Gulch. "Darius," she shook him. "We made it. Stay with me. Just a little further." He didn't respond, just hung limply in the saddle, held there by nothing but the grip of his legs and years of riding experience. Alara urged the horses down into the valley toward the settlement. People emerged from buildings, watching the strangers approach. A woman leading 2 horses, one carrying a man who looked half dead. A tall man with a marshal's badge stepped forward. He had gray hair and a weathered face, but his eyes were sharp and assessing. "Help you folks?" "Are you Jacob Thornton?" Alara's voice cracked from exhaustion. "I am. Darius Boone sent me. He's—" She gestured at the unconscious man. "He's been shot. He needs help." Thornton's eyes widened. "Boone? Darius Boone?" He strode forward, looked at the wounded man. "That's him, all right. Get him down. Carefully." He raised his voice. "Doc Hendricks, I need you." Hands reached up, easing Darius from the saddle. They carried him into a building while Alara dismounted on legs that barely held her. Thornton caught her elbow as she swayed. "Easy. When's the last time you ate?" "I don't remember." "Come on. Doc'll take care of your friend. Let's get you inside." He led her into a warm building, the marshal's office and jail combined. Sat her in a chair by a stove, handed her coffee and bread and cheese. She ate mechanically, not tasting anything. "Now," Thornton said, settling into a chair across from her. "Want to tell me what this is about? Boone and I go back a ways, but he's not the type to show up shot and half dead without good reason." Alara pulled out the ledger, set it on the desk between them. "This is why." Thornton picked it up, flipped through pages. His expression grew darker with each entry he read. Finally, he looked up. "Victor Hallstrom. You know him?" "Know of him. Rich bastard out of San Francisco. Heard rumors he was dirty, but this—" He tapped the ledger. "This is proof. Names, dates, amounts. This could bring down half the territorial government. That's why he wants it back. Why he's sent men to kill us." Alara wrapped her hands around the coffee cup. "How many men? I've lost count, but they keep coming." "Not anymore, they don't." Thornton stood, went to a telegraph machine in the corner. "I'm sending this to every newspaper in California. Sacramento, San Francisco, Los Angeles. By morning, Hallstrom's name will be poison. By next week, he'll be in chains." "Just like that?" "Just like that." He started tapping out the message, his fingers quick on the keys. "This is what they call a smoking gun, Miss— I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name." "Vance. Alara Vance." "Miss Vance, you just handed me the biggest story to hit this territory in a decade. Hallstrom won't be able to buy his way out of this. Too public. Too much evidence. He's finished." Alara wanted to feel relief, triumph, but all she felt was exhaustion and worry for Darius. The men who were hunting us, some of them are dead, but there might be more. Then they'll have to go through me. Thornton finished his telegraph, turned back to her. You're safe now, both of you. I'll post guards, send word to the Army garrison at Fort Miller. Anyone who comes looking for you will find a very hostile welcome. A door opened, and an older man with a medical bag stepped in. The mountain man's stable. Infection's bad, but I've seen worse. He'll live if he rests and lets the medicine work. Alara sagged with relief so profound it left her dizzy. Can I see him? He's sleeping. Best thing for him right now, but yes, come on. She followed the doctor to a small room behind the marshal's office. Darius lay on a narrow bed, his shoulder properly bandaged, his color already better than it had been. His breathing was even, peaceful. Alara pulled a chair to his bedside, took his hand. We made it, she whispered. It's over. He didn't wake, but his fingers tightened slightly around hers. She sat with him through the night while Thornton worked his telegraph, sending the contents of Hallstrom's ledger across California and beyond. Messages went out to newspapers, federal marshals, territorial judges who weren't on Hallstrom's payroll. The truth spreading like wildfire, impossible to contain or suppress. By dawn, it was done. The ledger's contents were public record. And somewhere in San Francisco, Victor Hallstrom was waking up to find his empire crumbling around him. Darius woke 3 days later, weak but clear-eyed. Alara was at his bedside immediately. Did we make it? He asked. We made it. She smiled. Thornton sent the ledger's contents to every newspaper in the state. Hallstrom's finished. Good. He struggled to sit up. And you? You're all right? I'm fine. Thanks to you. Thanks to both of us. He looked at their joined hands. What happens now? Now? Alara considered. Now Hallstrom goes to trial. His associates scatter or turn on him. The people he hurt get justice, and we... She paused. I don't know. What do we do? We? He raised an eyebrow. You planning on sticking around? If you'll have me. I know the original arrangement was just for winter, but... Alara, he squeezed her hand. I'd like you to stay. For winter. For spring. For as long as you want. She felt tears prick her eyes. Even though I'm still terrible at splitting wood? You're getting better. Give it another year, you might be almost competent. She laughed, and it felt good. Felt like release. I'd like that. They stayed in Miners Gulch for 2 weeks while Darius healed. In that time, news continued to arrive by telegraph. Hallstrom had been arrested trying to flee to Mexico. Dozens of officials implicated in the ledger had resigned or been arrested. The scandal was massive, reaching all the way to Sacramento. Federal prosecutors arrived to take Alara's testimony. She told them everything about Hallstrom's threats, the men he'd sent, the violence and fear. They recorded it all with grim efficiency. You'll need to testify at trial, the lead prosecutor told her. But we have more than enough to convict even without you. The ledger's damning enough on its own. I'll testify, Alara said firmly. I want to see his face when the verdict comes down. The prosecutor smiled. I think you'll get your wish. When Darius was strong enough to travel, they left Miners Gulch. But they didn't go back to the burned cabin. Instead, they went higher, deeper into the mountains, to a valley Darius had found years ago but never settled. This could work, he said, surveying the clearing beside a fast-running stream. Plenty of timber, good water, sheltered from the worst winds. We could build here. A cabin? Alara asked. A home. He looked at her. If you want. She walked the perimeter of the clearing, imagining it. A cabin, larger than the old one. A garden, maybe, in the summer. Space for chickens, a shed for supplies. A life built from nothing, on their own terms. I want, she said. They started building the next day. It was hard work, felling trees, stripping logs, notching them to fit. Alara's hands, already calloused from her weeks in the mountains, grew harder still. But she didn't complain, just worked beside Darius, learning as she went. Winter arrived before they finished, forcing them to camp in a temporary shelter. But by spring, the cabin stood, solid and weatherproof, a testament to their combined stubbornness. The trial happened in early summer. Alara and Darius rode to Sacramento together, a journey that took a week. The city felt strange to Alara now, too loud, too crowded, too confined. She couldn't wait to leave. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Hallstrom sat in the defendant's chair, his expensive suit and polished shoes looking absurd in the grim courtroom. He never looked at Alara, never acknowledged her existence. When her turn came to testify, she spoke clearly and calmly, told the jury everything about the threats, the abuse, the stolen years, about the ledger and what it represented. The defense attorney tried to discredit her, called her a scorned mistress, a thief, a liar. Alara endured it with the same patience she'd learned splitting wood and hauling water. The jury deliberated for 4 hours, guilty on all charges. Hallstrom showed no emotion when the verdict was read, just sat there, still and silent, as the judge sentenced him to 20 years in prison. As the bailiffs led him away in chains, he finally looked at Alara. There was nothing in his eyes. No rage, no regret, just emptiness. She felt nothing looking at him. He'd lost his power, and without that, he was nothing, not even worth hating. She and Darius left Sacramento the next morning and rode back to the mountains. Back home. The seasons turned. Summer gave way to fall, fall to winter. The cabin weathered its first storms, and Alara weathered them too. She learned to read the sky, to judge snow by its weight and texture, to move through the wilderness with confidence instead of fear. She never stopped being afraid entirely. The mountains were too dangerous for that. But the fear became manageable, useful, a thing that sharpened her senses rather than paralyzed her. And somewhere in that first year, between the hard work and the harder winters, between the silence and the rare conversations by firelight, she fell in love. Not the desperate, grasping love she'd felt for Hallstrom in the beginning, the kind that promised safety and security. This was different, quieter, built on trust and respect and the knowledge that they'd each seen the other at their worst and chosen to stay anyway. She didn't know when Darius fell in love with her. Maybe it was the day she'd shot the avalanche trigger and saved both their lives. Maybe it was earlier, watching her refuse to quit even when quitting made sense. Maybe it was later, the first time she'd split an entire cord of wood without asking for help. It didn't matter when, just that he had. They never formally married. There was no preacher this far into the wilderness, and neither of them felt the need for official paperwork. But one morning in early spring, Alara woke to find Darius carving something at the table. "What's that?" she asked. He held it up, a simple wooden ring sized for her finger. "Figured you should have something. To mark this. Us." She took it, slipped it on. It fit perfectly. "I don't have anything for you." "Yes, you do." He gestured around the cabin, at the life they'd built together, the home they'd made from ashes and determination. "This is enough." She kissed him then, and it felt like a promise kept, like a transaction that had started in desperation and ended in something neither of them had been looking for, but both needed. Years passed. They built onto the cabin, added a loft, a proper larder, a workshop for Darius's trapping gear. Alara started a garden that produced more than they could eat, and they traded the surplus with Larson's post and the miners in the valley. They heard news occasionally. Hallstrom died in prison 5 years into his sentence. The scandal he'd created reshaped California politics for a generation. The reforms that followed, the corruption investigations, the cleaned-up courts, those were called the Hallstrom legacy, though he'd hardly have wanted his name attached to them. Alara never went back to San Francisco. Never wanted to. The woman she'd been in that city, desperate, trapped, trading herself for the illusion of security, that woman was dead. And good riddance. The woman who'd replaced her was harder, stronger, scarred by violence, but not broken by it. Someone who could split wood and shoot straight and read a mountain storm 3 days before it arrived. Someone who'd chosen her life instead of having it chosen for her. One evening, 10 years after arriving in Iron Ridge, Alara sat on the cabin's porch watching the sun set behind the peaks. Darius joined her, settling into the chair he'd carved from a lightning-struck pine. "Thinking about something?" he asked. "About the woman who was supposed to get off that stagecoach. Sarah Brennan. Wonder what happened to her. Probably married her Sacramento merchant, living in a nice house, soft bed, servants." "Probably," Alara smiled. "Think she got the better deal?" "Do you?" She looked at the mountains, at the cabin behind them, at the rough-weathered man beside her. "No, I don't." "Me neither." They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell and the stars emerged. So many more stars than you could ever see in a city, scattered across the sky like diamonds spilled on velvet. It hadn't been an easy life. There had been hard winters and lean times, injuries and setbacks. There would be more ahead, but they'd face them the same way they'd faced everything else. Together, stubborn, refusing to break. The stagecoach had brought a mistake to Iron Ridge all those years ago. A woman in silk who had no business in the mountains, a transaction that should never have worked. But mistakes, Alara had learned, sometimes became the best decisions you ever made. And transactions could transform into something infinitely more valuable. Not love bought and paid for, but love earned, forged in fire and blood in the simple act of choosing, every day, to stay. She reached over, took Darius's hand. He squeezed back, and no words were needed. This was home. This was life. This was enough. The mountains rose around them, eternal and indifferent. And in their shadow, two people who'd once been strangers sat together and watched the night come on, content in the silence and in each other. The story that had begun with gunfire and fear had ended with peace. Not the fragile peace of absence, but the hard-won peace of survival, of two people who'd been tested by violence and chosen mercy anyway, who'd been given every reason to give up and refused. They'd built something from nothing, and what they'd built would last. Not forever. Nothing in the mountains lasted forever, but long enough, and that was all anyone could ask. As the last light faded from the sky, Alara thought about the ledger, long since turned to ash in some government furnace, about Hallstrom, rotting in an unmarked prison grave, about Hayes and Garrett, and all the other men who'd come hunting and found death instead. She felt no triumph in their deaths, no satisfaction, just a quiet recognition that she'd done what was necessary, had become what she'd needed to become. And now, finally, she could become something else, someone softer, but no less strong. Someone who could split wood in the morning and play music on the fiddle Darius had traded for in the evening, who could shoot to kill if she had to, but hoped she'd never have to again. The woman from the stagecoach was gone. The woman beside the mountain trapper had taken her place. And this woman, Alara thought, was exactly who she was supposed to be. The end came quietly, as endings should, not with fire or blood, but with two people sitting together as the stars wheeled overhead and the mountains kept their ancient watch. Home, hard-won and well-earned. Home,